Okay, here we are for your lesson on energy in the ecosystem. We're talking about food webs, we're talking about food chains, we're talking about energy getting around. Last unit we talked about photosynthesis and respiration and how energy is passed along from the sun to plants to other organisms that eat the plants. We're going to look at that a little closer in the ecosystem. So let's start by defining some things. We've got producers and we've got consumers. So write down this definition in your notes, or write down something that means the same thing but makes better sense to you. In general, producers are autotrophs. They're the ones that produce their own food. That's the plants, right? The green plants that photosynthesize and make glucose, which then consumers help themselves to. Consumers are heterotrophs, and heterotrophs consume producers or other consumers to get their energy, right? So we, for example, are consumers. We eat plants, and some of us also eat animals to get the energy that we want. Now, what I would like you to do is in your notes, think about any example of a producer and a consumer and how they're related. Basically, I want you to think of something that is a consumer and tell me what it eats that is a producer or a green plant. Pause the video, do that now. Okay, now let's talk about the different types of consumers that we have. Most of you have probably heard these words before: carnivore, herbivore, omnivore, scavenger. Maybe you've heard of, maybe you haven't. But these are different types of consumers. Carnivores is an animal that eats other animals. An herbivore is the other end of the spectrum, an animal that eats mostly plants, okay? An omnivore eats both. Pause however often you need to write down the definitions. A scavenger is an animal that eats dead animals. Now, what I would like you to do is open up Google and ask Google some questions. Come up with some examples of carnivores. Come up with some examples of herbivores, omnivores, and scavengers. List those in your example boxes and be ready to talk about them in class. Now, another type of organism that is not a producer and is kind of a special kind of consumer is a decomposer. A decomposer is an organism that breaks down biotic material. Now we're talking about mushrooms, fungi, we're talking about bacteria that break down other organisms. Do the same thing you did up here for decomposers. Stop. Maybe you've got an idea of some examples of decomposers. Maybe you need to go do a Google search and find some examples of decomposer, but pause the video and do that now. Now, you've probably heard in elementary school about a food chain, which is a series of events where one organism eats another organism to get energy, right? Where we might have we might have some green plants that are eaten by a zebra, which is a herbivore. Where's my zebra? There he is. And the zebra gets eaten by the lion, and the energy flows in that way. It came from the sun, the plant used it to make glucose, the zebra chomped on it to get the energy, and the lion had lunch on the zebra. Now the energy flows, we connect this with arrows, and we always point the arrow in the direction that the energy flows. So my arrow is going to go in this way. You see how my arrow is pointing. I'm going to make this really big so you can make sure that you see it. Which direction the energy is pointing. The energy is going from the plant to the zebra. and then it's going from the zebra straight into the lion's mouth. Now this is a very simplistic way of looking at how things work. You know that there might be other things that the zebra eats, and the lion doesn't only eat zebras, right? So there's more going on in this ecosystem than just a simple food chain. What we have are food webs, and that's a little more realistic. Basically, a food web shows connections between many food chains in an environment. So let's take a look at an example. Here I have a bunch of organisms that live maybe in a rainforest. And I am going to show the connections between them, how the energy is passing from one to the next. So I'm going to use arrows to do that, and I'm always going to make sure that the arrow points in the direction the energy is flowing. For example, the monkeys get energy from the bananas, right? So the energy is going to the monkeys. The monkey is probably getting eaten by the tiger, so the energy is then flowing from the monkey to the tiger. What eats the grass? The grass gets eaten by the insects, so the energy is flowing to the insects. But the insects also might want to eat the fruit in the trees, right? So the energy is flowing there too. And what eats them? Well, they might get eaten by the frog. And also, they're probably getting eaten by the bird as well, right? Perhaps even they get snacked on by the monkeys. So the energy is flowing towards those consumers that are eating the insects. Our snake here is getting his energy somewhere too. He's probably eating the frog. He might also be eating the bird. Let's set him up eating the bird since I've moved the arrow that direction. And he probably eats the frog as well. Now, whoops, I'm sorry. I've got these. Do you see what I did wrong here? What I did wrong was I put the arrow on the wrong end, because we're talking about the energy flowing from the frog to the snake, from the bird to the snake, right? The arrows have to go in the direction of the energy flow. Where's the bird getting its energy? Well, we said the insects, but the bird may also get its energy from the fruit tree. So let's put an arrow going in that direction. What other connections do you see? Bring that up in class next time, okay? Now, on your notes, there's space for you to draw your own food web. I'd like you to think about a rainforest or an ocean, or you could come up with another environment if you'd like, another ecosystem. Think about some of the organisms in there. Make sure you've got some producers, make sure you've got consumers, and make sure you've got some herbivores, some omnivores, some carnivores, and draw the flow of the energy in your food web on your notes.